Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that was love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight we have a really, really fun show. We've got our good friend back, Kris Koenig, who is the head beaver at Golden Beaver Distillery. I've got my Golden Beaver hat on. I have my Beaver Liquor t-shirt on. I'm ready to go. I'm a company man. But we've got Kris with us and our good friend Mike from My Whiskey Den. What's up, Mike?
Nothing. I didn't go full beef like you did. I didn't get the memo, so I've just got bottles.
That works too. That's the important part.
Yeah.
The merch is nice too, though.
Yes, it is.
But hey, we're going to get right into this in just a minute. But before we do that, hey Mike, why don't you tell everybody about Bar Cart Co-op?
Oh, you want me to give the whole spiel about Bar Cart Co-op? Okay,
Yeah.
well, all right. Well, the Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who create content for the whiskey and other distilled spirits public. Their YouTube and Facebook pages have information about upcoming and past special shows, which happen about every quarter. There's blind tastings, distiller panels, discussions of special collaborations, and the usage of unique grains. Bar Cart Co-op has educational and fun episodes for your enjoyment. And are there any on the schedule? Because they're usually one a quarter. Is there one coming up, Kevin?
We're going to do something on the project that Alan's working on with Eric Wolf.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. All right. So that'll be the one coming up. And then we also have going down the line, the oldest one, Distillers Talk, which is hosted by Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. And it's a conversation with people from distilleries and distillery adjacent. New episodes come at the end of the work week. There's also My Whiskey Den, which I'm a part of with Mitch and Pat. And it started off as a love of Midwestern craft whiskey and is now primarily on American craft whiskey and people such as Kris making great spirits and trying to get the word out. There is also, One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Alan has a lot of worded shows. This is the show where Alan answers your questions about distilling and puts them to the test. That could be grains, mash bills, equipment, and methodology. New episodes are random, so subscribe to get that. And then there's You Have Ghosts. If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. Another show from Alan, which is about the spirits and paranormal among us, as well as the unexplained and the spiritual. Subscribe on Spotify to get the 3 previous seasons and the current season, which is in action right now. And then we have, last but not least, Whiskey in My Ring podcast with David Levine. And David does a great job with interviews, really good job with reviewing whiskey. And he does really like to get into the weeds with his guests. So please check him out.
Yeah. And then our show.
Well, there's that one too. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me?
I'd love for you to talk about that. I always love when you talk about it.
Well, Bourbon Turntable is where it mixes the love of music with the love of whiskey. There's conversations with musicians, writers, distillery folks, and common folks like us about music and whiskey. It releases every Wednesday on all your platforms, including YouTube.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. That's
You're welcome.
Really, really precious of you to do that. A couple of news items, and then we'll get right into stuff with Kris, because this is going to be a fun time with him. Our friend Alan Bishop. Wait a minute. That's not a very flattering picture. Sorry. Hang on. Our friend Alan Bishop. He has announced that he is leaving Spirits of French Lick. He has been there since the distillery started, and has stamped his name and reputation and influence all over that brand. He is as intertwined with that brand as any non-owner distiller could be. So Alan's not announced where he's going next or what he's doing next, but we'll look forward to seeing that. Guys, any thoughts on Alan's departure from French Lick?
Go ahead, Kris.
Alan is probably one of the top 5 distillers right now, at least on that bridge between craft and the big 6 that's out there. He's exceptional as far as his skill set. His knowledge is probably unbeaten, except for again the the guys at the Big Six. As far as history is probably best.
Yeah.
Definitely knows his art. I think I think when he's at that 40-year mark in his age, 36 to 40 years old, you gotta make a cut. You can either work for somebody or work for yourself. Hopefully he's going to go work for himself. I mean, he hasn't announced it, but as somebody who's been an entrepreneur out there on the edges since I was 33, I wouldn't work for anybody ever again. And I think it's a good time for him to make the cut. I mean, as far as skill set, like I said, you could list, out of the 2,500 craft distillers out there right now, he's definitely in the top 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And then that 10% is probably the top 3%. I mean, I don't think there's many distillers you think of off the top of your head that can put up against him, and definitely not from an artistic point of view and a historical point of view. I mean, he's who we call. I mean, when we run into something, I got a list of names that I can call because of my relationship with Moonshine University and some other folks. And, like, okay, well, who would I call on this problem? And Alan's always he's always one of the first that you call because he has the knowledge. And if he doesn't know the answer to your problem, he knows someone to call.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that he refers you to somebody else because he's that knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah. He always does seem to be very open to help anybody that asks. At least that's from the stories that I've heard. Seems to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at if you get lucky enough to take the 6-day distiller's course, I've been distilling before I've gone into that program, but you don't know what you don't know. So you have to be able to sit in front of a banker when you start your own distillery. And the banker's looking at, well, where in the hell did you learn? Like in my garage. It doesn't fly. So you gotta have some credibility. And when you're sitting in the 6-day distiller course and you get done with it, they make you raise your hand and make a pledge that you won't be a dick and that you will not keep anything secret that you do, because what makes this industry move forward is the fact that it's a free flowing highway of information. You share what you know. I mean, grain bills aren't secret, and 1 or 2 point difference ain't going to make a difference, as far as, flavor. Your barrel plays a big role. I mean, there's so many other things that influences the final distillate and the final whiskey that you just gotta get reality checked that, you play a huge role, but you're not the end all to be all. And that's the maturity level that you need to have to move forward in this industry.
Yeah.
And you need to take as much information as you can. And Alan, embraces that philosophy, and he's there to share the information. And, the first time I met Alan, he had done one of his early podcasts with a guy named Rick Gibson about the Tennessee Thumper, and I wanted a Thumper here. It's like, Dad, we definitely want that here at the distillery, and I want to play with that. And and within a day, I was talking to Rick. Took me, another 2 years to get my rig. Rick,
Yeah.
molasses Rick, but we eventually did get our rig, and we got, then it got added on, and we got even more and added to the rig later on. But Rick's a cool guy. Alan's a great guy. And both are willing to share their information and move forward. I mean, this isn't top secret stuff, but the finesse that comes with experience is, and that is, that makes a difference. That little inside track of knowing whatever it is about your still, or whatever you know about your mash, whatever you know about your aging process in your rick house. And we'll talk about my rick house tonight and how it influences our spirits. Um, everybody has an angle. Everybody has something that makes their spirit great.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean their spirit's the best. And that's something that I would hope that the folks turning into this podcast will learn, that there are amazing spirits out there. There isn't one that surpasses the rest. There isn't one that's on top of the peak. And as soon as our fan group realizes that you know, I look at my whiskey bar right now. It's right around the corner here. I mean, I have everything. Yellowstone, you know.
Yep.
You know, they do their great stuff. Yeah. You know, I got some Pappies up there. I got everything up there. And the point is they're all great whiskeys. There's not one that surpasses the other. And I think the beauty of what's happening in craft distilling now, there's 2,500 of us out there making it, is that we're going to level that field. I mean, it's going to flatten very quickly, and that's better for the consumer, because that means the consumer isn't going to get hosed down the line. You know, you're going to be able to get a great whiskey at a great price, and it may have something unique to it. It might have a grain bill that's unique. It might have an aging process that's unique, maturation process, different oaks, you know, different finishes. It's only better for the consumer, and but it definitely makes it more democratic.
Yeah. Well, Mike, any thoughts on Alan real quick?
I mean, Kris said a lot of it. There's not that many people who, especially from a historical perspective and historical in distilling, Alan didn't come from, a family name that is known in the industry for a couple hundred years, that has family history to lean back on to get that. And so he's doing all that research himself, not for necessarily his own good, but for the good of, or I'd say for himself, for Indiana, and for distilling as a whole. That'd be my guess as in that order. But his skill set, the stuff that he's come up with there, he has a very very spiritual reverence for what he's doing. And is the first to say, I don't take this seriously. I'm not curing diseases out here. We're making whiskey. Just so happens what he's doing is really good, and his methodology is good, and he's willing to share, his information. And there's a reason that people like Kris call on him, and he is, he's a friend, and I appreciate his friendship. I love his spirits, and can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch and fun to see what he does and what's to follow. He's far from done. So this is just a great new chapter that he's heading into. Speaking of a chapter, our friend Jerry Dalton has written a new book. If you don't know, Jerry is the only non-Beam family member to ever be the master distiller at Jim Beam Distilling. And Jerry is he's been retired for several years, but he has written this book called The Way of Bourbon. I've had the opportunity to read an earlier version of it, and it's really good. It's a lot of fun. Jerry's got some great stories. He has some very frank opinions about things, and it's a fun read. So look for this on Amazon and give that place an order for that. You will really enjoy it, I'm very sure. And Jerry's going to be back on Bourbon Turntable probably within the next couple of weeks, and to promote the book and to tell stories. And he's just a lot of fun to hang out with and drink whiskey with. So that'll be a lot of fun. So we're going to drink some whiskey now with Kris, and what we're going to start with is this Chico Creek rye. That's the image that's on the bottle. All the bottles have just gorgeous labeling. Kris, tell us about this Chico Creek Rye.
Well, the Chico Creek Rye was one of our first spirits that we did, and my son Nils was about to be deployed to Africa at the time, and he was working for us, and so we wanted to do a rye. We both really enjoy rye, so this is a 87% California rye out of Northern California with 12% barley.
Mm-hmm.
And it's aged in obviously New American oak, char 3, and medium toast. And it's just it's a nice sipper. The problem is that we did one barrel, and because we had to make a decision as far as the distillery, what we were going to be known for, and we went full force into the Pacific Flyway,
mm-hmm.
and with the rice, and when we popped this barrel, it was very quickly evident to us that we probably made a strategic mistake. We are about to correct that. We'll do a run of rye this spring, and they'll put those barrels. So we'll be a little bit of a delay, about 2 years before we can reintroduce it. But as you guys will find out tonight, that we age our spirits maturate a little differently out here in California because we're dry and hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different of a curve as far as getting what you're looking for in a spirit. But I think it's, as far as an expression of rye, it's a very nice one, and it's, I won't say it's the best, but I'll definitely say that it's up there.
Yeah. Yep. The level of creativity that's come about with rye in particular, with primarily with craft distillers, but with some of the big guys too. That's very encouraging, and it's a lot of fun to try the different things. And this is definitely unique in terms of a rye. Man, I like this a lot. Well, you can tell I like it a lot. There's not much left of this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one that looks like that too.
I mean, you come off at 95 rye, which is, there's nothing wrong with 95.5. I think having a little higher barley in the mash bill helps.
Mm-hmm.
I think it smooths out a little bit of that spearmint spiciness, kind of diminishes, and you get more of a base note from the rye grain itself.
Yeah, it's got some of that, rye spiciness that's people talk about, but it's not like peppery spicy. It's it's warm, but it's not overpowering. It's got some nice fruit to it. It's got some mint to it.
Yeah,
Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, all of the above. I get the little bit of mint. I got the fruit. I was, of course, writing my stuff down because I'm a dork, but and I'm sure it's power of suggestion,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm feeling like I get a little. I don't remember this from the last time I had it, but I feel like I'm getting that little pear note that I seem to get off of your stuff, Kris, which is probably because I'm staring at 4 other bottles with your name on it. But
well, Harold is a very special still, and there's a reason why we have him. He does a great job on as far as finishing still and making everything really nice. I doubt that you're getting the pear on the rye, but
yeah,
it is. It's just the fuse oil ratio that comes off on that still.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice mouthfeel, and then opens up those fruits. I don't think because the oils are there.
Yeah, this is very good, Kris. I know I think it may have been on a bar cart show that we talked about this, but yeah, it's still fantastic.
Yeah.
And so you've done another run of the rye, or you're getting ready to do another
We're
run?
going to do another run this spring.
Yeah.
So our winter's been, I won't say harsh, but it hasn't been super cold, but it hasn't been super warm either. And we've been struggling keeping our fermentations up at a temperature we can manage.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kind of cut back on a little bit of production because it's just not worth the expensive energy to move forward on some of this stuff as far as keep heating mashes up. So we're this week, hopefully we're going to bust it into some 70-degree temperature and we can get back our facility, get back up to a
Good.
manageable temperature and we don't have to worry about it.
Good. And I know you can't see this through the camera on the computer, but the legs on this thing, man, it's just so rich and oily.
Yeah. And that's our pot still. That's Harold. That's we bringing that through, and that's a signature because of that still. And I can't thank the folks over at Liberty Pole Spirits for selling us that still. I think it was probably the biggest mistake they ever made. we will be glad to take it. So,
was it named Harold before you bought it?
That's
your
that's
name?
Jim Ho's dad's name, or father's name, and so they named it after his father. And so when he came west, we agreed to keep his name.
That's good.
So now we have Harold. Of course, our big stripping still we had to call Maud. So we have both working at our distillery. And if you're a film fanatic, which was my previous background, you should know that film by heart.
Yes, that's awesome. You just touched on it there, your film background. I know that we've talked about this when you've been on before, but briefly kind of go over what that background was and how you got into distilling.
Yeah, so I got hired back in about 2003 to be a consultant on a telecourse that was being made by Coast Community College and I believe Annenberg or PBS at the time. I don't remember which who was the main producer on that. Hired us basically to make a 20-part series on astronomy to be shown to college students, and started as a consultant because my background with the National Observatory, and went from a consultant to film producer to basically writing 19 of the 20 episodes, and we got super lucky and ended up with LA area Emmy for production and one for non-news writing, which was Emmy that I individually received for that project. And that launched my filmmaking career, and went on to make some nationally produced stuff for PBS and for theatrical releases. 400 Years of Telescope, which was a PBS science special. We did Salted Civil Rights Under Fire with Ice-T on the Second Amendment, the history of the Second Amendment through American history, and its influence on politics. And then the last film we did before I quit was with Sir Elton John, called Sight, the Story of Vision. And it kind of looks at vision and the different health crises that's happening around the world dealing with vision. We have some real issues, a lot of it tied to diabetes, a lot of it tied to economics, and cultural and everything else. And the film kind of looks at all of those. And so that is the filmmaking career. I did a little smaller projects in between all that, but those are the main ones. And you can see all those if you go on Amazon Prime and type my name in, they'll pop up.
That's a heck of a career in and of itself. and then you wake up one day, I think I want to be a distiller.
Well, yeah. So the person that got me into it was Anita, and Anita and I became a unit. We didn't get married, but I would say that she was my wife. And Anita succumbed to stage 4 breast cancer,
Mhm.
and that was kind of the end of that career. But through that career, I ended up we were invited to premiere a film called 400 Years of Telescope
Mhm.
at the Edinburgh Science Festival, which was promoting Galileo's 400th anniversary of using a telescope to change our humans' perspective of us in the universe, which was a huge psychological and mental breakthrough
Mhm.
uh, in history, which I still think it's one of the biggest moments of human history. Realizing that we are not that important in the whole thing. But through that going to that festival, I ended up getting stuck in Edinburgh, Scotland, because the volcano in Iceland, and ended up meeting Charlie MacLean, who wrote the Encyclopedia of Scotch,
Mhm.
and took 2 master classes back to back during the festival. Then ended up killing a bottle of wine at a restaurant with him, and then ending up at his home at about 11:30 at night, and until 4 a.m. in the morning. Charlie absolutely educated me on Scotch, and it was a priceless experience, and one that I will totally be indebted to him for. We actually I tried to pitch a show to PBS about the spirits of Charlie and going around the world and having Charlie drink. This is long before Anthony Bourdain came along.
Yeah.
Have Charlie drink indigenous spirits and talk about the fermentation process and everything else. And the folks I pitched to said, well, it involves alcohol, so we're not interested. So, which is too bad because it would have been an
Yeah.
unbelievable series.
Yeah.
But it did launch my personal drive to, well, what stops me from making spirits? You know, why can't I go out and experiment making some of these different spirits? And I eventually ended up back with American Spirits as far as my choice of spirits. I mean, I love Scotch, but
Mhm.
to be honest with you, I can't pronounce half the names of the spirits. So that kind of makes it hard. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah, yeah, you have to drink a few before you can actually pronounce those.
exactly. So, but I did come back to saying that we here in America make some great spirits, and I really got delved into that. And through that process, Mary Ann, my wife, bought me a still, and she probably regrets it to this day that she did that. And within, I don't know, 3 or 4, 5, 6 batches, I don't know how quick it was. And it didn't take long to realize where I was heading as far as a career path.
Yeah.
And that's what launched Golden Beaver.
Yeah. That's a great story. You know, the significance and the influence you had in your first career as a filmmaker, and now the things that you're doing that are very innovative, very creative, pushing the boundaries of an entirely different industry. Uh, you're that shows a lot of leadership and a lot of vision, uh, just for you as a person to be able to do that, and essentially to do very, very different careers.
Well, I'm totally blown away by the compliments, and I do thank you for all the kind words. But you know, um, I just look at it as just another form of creativity, right?
Mhm.
We're I was a storyteller before, and I'm now trying to tell a story with our spirits, and you know, the veneer of whiskey and spirits selling.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go negative here after those great positive words, but there's a lot of bullshit in our industry,
Yes, there is.
and there is a stack of crap that is sold to everybody when they walk into the liquor store. And I think I would hope that in this next evolution of of craft distilling that's coming down the pike that will quit telling stories that my grandpa had this recipe in the back of his pocket. And we'll actually look to the distiller that's sitting at the end of that still and listen to their history and their story of why they're trying to make what they're making.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't matter what grandpa thought. It doesn't matter what grandpa made. It didn't matter if Uncle Jed ran, moonshine over the ridge. What can you do as a distiller? What can you do as someone who has to cook a mash, mature, ferment that mash, distill that mash, and then manage its maturation?
Right.
That has nothing to do with the past. That has to do with the guy standing there talking to you. And I really hope that, everybody that enjoys spirits, especially American whiskey and bourbon, will start listening and start asking the questions. Well, who is the guy that's head of third shift over at Sazerac? Who's the second shift guy? Who's the first shift guy? Because those are the guys that are actually making the whiskey. Now they have their QC departments, and we can talk about the QC department and the master taster and all that, and that's really important as well. But when it comes down to craft distillers, that QC department's one person or maybe two people, maybe even three, but it's not many. And we need to be listening to them and their stories because that's what's really important.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the Pacific Flyway straight bourbon whiskeys. Now you've got, we have barrel 59 and barrel 58 that we're going to be trying. Just give us an overview of what went into the development and creation of these, and what your maturation process was, and a little bit of things along those lines.
Yeah. So we of course we knew that we were. I'll actually go back to the classroom at Moonshine U in Louisville. So I'm sitting at Moonshine University in April of 19, and we're sitting there, or I'm sitting in the classroom, and the first 2 days is nothing but an anxiety attack. Because you go in with your business plan in your head, and then these guys come in and go, everything you know is wrong, and you're literally, you're sitting in the classroom just going, having palpitations, and you're breathing heavy, and you're like, I'm having, an anxiety attack, and this is never going to work. And these guys are going corn. So everybody comes through, all these experts come through, and the mill that you got to buy has got to deal with corn, roller mill versus hammer mill. And I'm going, I live in Northern California. We got corn in California. We got some of the best corn you're ever going to eat. Our Brentwood sweet corn, which Mike, I think, has had when he's been out here in Central California, is probably some of the best sweet corn you ever eat. Come 4th of July, we're loving California for 3 months, because that means the Brentwood corn's coming out. It's super great. But where I live is not corn. We got rice. We're surrounded, and Mike will back you up as you're driving up. Once you pass Sacramento and you come north, you think, what in the hell happened to California? Because we got rice paddies every direction you look at. And so I'm in rice. So I'm sitting in this class, and the guys are going, corn. I'm like going, no. It's got to be rice. We're going to be doing rice. And I won't say that there's xenophobia in the liquor industry, but there, at least in American whiskey, but there is, because you bring up the word rice, they look at you sideways. So there's 4 of us that do rice right now, and in any major portion of our production. There's Melick Distillers down in Louisiana, and I apologize for the next 2 because I can't remember. There's one in Little Rock. They're doing rice. There's a guy out in the Carolinas that's doing rice, and there's us that are actually doing rice at any level. And so I'm in the class going, well, we're going to be doing rice, and I researched, and I actually during the class I find some research from a guy that's in Japan who does a no cook fermentation on rice, and I'm like, I'm really jazzed now because these guys just dumped on me. It's going to take $1 million to start my distillery, which they weren't wrong. I just didn't want to embrace it. But I was like, okay, I can cut the fuel cost right there. I'm going to do no cook rice. But it did open me up to rice fermentation and how you could do fermentation differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned to the instructors. Look, I could do a no cook, mash, and instead of a week, it takes 14 days, 15 days to do the fermentation. Which, when you talk to a professional distiller, that's nothing but you're talking money. You're losing money, and I've realized that. But anyway, so back to the mash bill. So we get started, we get the distillery open, and I contact MGP, which all distilleries do because you have to have something to sell in the interim. And under state law, you have to bring in your whiskey, you have to affect the whiskey in some way before you can call it yours. You just can't take it and rebottle it. And so we came up with our Pacific Flyaway, or with our Honey Run, which is our honey whiskey. And we brought that on board, and we found 6 barrels of a batch of bourbon that was done with the University of Michigan and MGP, which had some long grain rice in it. And we bought those barrels and we brought them in and we started playing around with them and figuring out how we could change it to make it a whiskey that we can sell under California law. And we did that. But I was not a fan of it's a good whiskey. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a great whiskey. And if you're lucky enough to have an early release of our Pacific Flyway, I encourage you to hold on to it because I think it's a great whiskey and enjoy it as such. But the rice that we have here in Northern California is called Cal Rose. It's a medium grain and all long grain. It's got a little higher carbohydrates in it. It's a little sweeter. It's used for making sticky rice, which is very popular in Asia. In fact, most of the rice that we grow here in California doesn't even sit here. It goes on and gets exported. And so it lends itself to distilling because what are we looking for when we make a mash is we're looking forward to making a something that has a lot of sugar in it that we can introduce the yeast to. Hey, honey, not to go offline. Marianne, you're going to have to talk amongst yourselves, talk about the whiskey. I have to get a battery charger. Or we're going to lose this connection.
All right.
So hang on.
All right. All right. So, Mike, we're trying barrel 59 of this. What are your thoughts?
So when I was fortunate enough to have this out of the barrel when I visited Kris in the fall, and my comment was along the lines of give this one blind to bourbon lovers, especially bourbon bros. Number one, they won't guess what it's made from. Number two,
right.
They will not guess how old it is, and number three, they'll have no idea who made it.
Right. Right.
It's just got it. You wouldn't know that there is I'll call an alternative grain in it, but the flavor of it is it's just straight up solid bourbon. Yeah. Except the thing that I've noticed about this one, and also about the other one, 58, is obviously, and I don't know the percentage, but we know it's got 51% corn in it, right?
Right.
I got no corn. I got no corn on the nose or the palate. And it's which is interesting because usually you just pick up a little bit of it, but it is just, it's just like, for me, it's just straight up cooked caramel, but there's a dryness on the nose, but also I know it's oily, and just that oakiness. It's bourbon. It's what you think of when you think of bourbon. Right.
And this is, I don't know, a year or so ago, I wrote an article about whiskey bias, and does that get the better of us? And one of the whiskeys that I included in that article was Pacific Flyway, because again, when you say rice, people's head goes a different direction. But you're missing out if you're hung up on any kind of bias. I mean, some people, their biases are very, very broad within whiskey, and it's like, oh, well, if it's not Weller, or if it's not Jim Beam, or if it's not Four Roses or Wild Turkey, then I'm not going to drink it. You're just missing out. And then if you do accept craft whiskey, and you kind of cut things off at, well, it needs to be a certain age, or we finally refer to those folks as age whores. And then you get into something that is a younger whiskey made with an alternate grain with rice, and if people are going to stiff arm that, you're just missing out. Because this, I get like peach and pear, and like a dark chocolate Three Musketeers on the is kind of my fat guy tasting note of it.
That's a good fat guy tasting note.
Mm-hmm. And then the finish, I actually get a little apple. So there's a lot of different fruit notes going on here, and it is 112.75 proof. So, but I don't know that it necessarily drinks to that proof. But it does pack a little punch, more so than the aforementioned Pacific Flyway bourbon that came from MGP. But
so I'm back with you. I will tell you a little history about this barrel. This was not we didn't top this barrel off when we put it in. We were short, so this didn't get a full fill. And I think the oxidation in the barrel actually taught us a few things about short fill barrels. And I think, I don't think we're going to be topping our barrels off completely in the future, because I think it really helped us.
Yeah, because this is mine is bottle 19 of 73, and then the other one, barrel 58, which we'll try in a little bit, is bottle number 201 of 230. So that's a striking difference. You're getting almost a third of the number of bottles from barrel 59 as you do from 58. And
you'll taste the difference. But and neither one it's not one is better than the other. I just think that if you're looking for a accelerated maturation, having a little extra a little air in the barrel is not a negative. I think it actually will help, because those upper staves dry out, a little more air exchange, and I think that helps move as far as you pressurize the barrel, you fill it up, and you add thermal environment, so you're adding heat, taking heat away, and you want that liquid to move into the staves and move out of the staves. Well, if it's fully sealed, you're minimizing that flow back and forth, because it has to overcome the pressure that's presented by having the sealed barrel. So if there's a little air in there, that means you're going to get more flow back and forth on those staves because of physics. You're not, it's just science. Yeah. You're not hiding pressure back and forth. And so we're getting more exchange between the staves and the liquid. Not to extreme that we had with barrel 59 here, because it was, basically it was a half-filled barrel. But it did teach us something. Don't top the barrel. Leave some headspace there so that we can actually have that exchange of fluid back and forth in the staves. So, the history of distilling is all about the mistakes.
Yeah.
What
Well,
you didn't do was supposed to happen is why we move forward.
being willing to try something different just to see what happens. Lenny Eckstein at Deerhammer is
Yep.
probably the poster child for that. I think that
Well, he's a poster child for a lot of things. Let's just
he is.
love
But
you, Lenny. I
I
do,
don't.
man.
I don't think he's afraid to try anything, and because he looks at it like, if it doesn't turn out well, guess what? We learned something.
Yeah.
But fortunately, at least what he lets out of the distillery, everything that he's done is pretty darn good.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that, and that's the kind of freedom that craft distillers have that the big guys don't. And the bigger you get, the harder it is to do those kind of things.
Yeah, and we're able to pivot quicker.
Right.
We're able to say, okay, we learned this from these 8 barrels of bourbon. We learned these certain things that we've come to know, and so moving forward, this is how we're going to proceed. And I'm sure 100 years ago they did the same thing. Jack became Jack for a reason, and
Right.
Jim became Jim for a reason, because they learned this is what we can do and be consistent in our production. We're learning that now. That's why we're craft and we're not established, because we're learning where the nuances are in our maturation process and our grain bills and everything else. But I think we're onto something. I think of what you're drinking here is, of course I'm biased. I think it's a solid bourbon. We're right at
Yeah.
We're right at 51% corn. We're right at 25% rice, 14% rye, and the balance being the 10% on the barley malt. I think it's a great mash bill. I think the Cal Rose really lends itself to making it a softer, more approachable bourbon
Mm-hmm.
than, let's say, a 75 blend of corn, because corn is harsh, man. I mean, I love corn, but it's harsh, and that's why you have to age it longer, because you got to beat it down. You got to beat it in submission. It's like an 18-year-old kid that goes to boot camp. You got to beat it in submission. I mean, it's the same thing with corn.
Yeah.
Got to learn to mine.
Yeah. Hey, so one of the when we were talking about doing this episode, was talking about, okay, well, what are you going to do on the music side of things? And I said, well, why don't we just talk about California music? And you jumped right into Bakersfield Sound and CCR, and so we're going to try to, when this could go on all night, but we're kind of gonna, we've already planning to do this in at least 2 parts, maybe more as needed. But what we're wanting to cover today is to start with that Bakersfield Sound that started in the 1950s and kind of go through most of the 70s, and we're going to hit a lot of different things here. But this has been a fun topic to kind of explore over the last couple of weeks, just in what I've been listening to. So,
yeah,
the Bakersfield Sound, Kris, tell everybody a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you the personal connection. So the term Okie, I think, is probably you guys back east, back on the other side of Mississippi. You probably go, yeah, Okie, it's from someone from Oklahoma. But after, during the Dust Bowl, it was a major thing here. It was a huge shift of humanity on this continent, from Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, the Plains states, a little bit of Colorado. They all moved to California. And, California had, obviously, was the salad bowl of America. It still is today. Most of what you eat in your greens come from California. More of it probably influenced now. There's probably more Mexican produce in there than there was in the past, but it's still predominantly California. Avocados, go through your salad bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Lettuce, avocados, cucumbers, carrots, all that was growing here year round, and it needed people to pick it. And these farmers coming from that have just lost their farms, packed up their family, came here, and
Mm-hmm.
they've not only brought their skill set of farming and the labor that they came along with it. And I will say labor is a skill set, but they brought their music. So what were they listening to in the 30s? Well, they were Grand Ole Opry. They were listening to the Grand Ole Opry. They had the honky tonk and square dances, and they brought that, and they brought it to the West Coast.
So that influence between Chet Atkins and the Opry, and basically California. California was new, it was fresh. You dropped off the old. You got rid of the burden that you carried from your historical past. I mean, some of these folks went from being dirt farmers to working for um, avionics or doing aircraft production or creating the new widget or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
became, the biggest item in America at retail. I mean, everybody got a fresh start, and with that fresh start came the fresh start of music, and then that led to people like Buck Owens, and Buck Owens looking at this crossover of what's it, rockabilly
Mm-hmm.
that was real popular at the time, Buddy Holly style music, and Valens, and blending that sound with traditional Oklahoma style or Grand Ole Opry style music, and
Mm-hmm.
create this whole new genre. And that totally affected, the next generation, which was, the Byrds and everybody else that followed in the rock area. I mean, including the Grateful Dead. What people don't realize that, the Dead, had the first steel guitar that was, steel pedal guitar that was horizontal, that went into a almost vertical position on a regular, 6-string guitar.
Hmm.
And that totally changed the music. That created the Dead sound, right? That
Right.
was the Dead. So
Yeah.
huge change.
Yeah. The Bakersfield Sound was almost, at least in its early iterations, was holding on to what country music was from kind of when Buck Owens or Merle Haggard or Glenn Campbell, kind of what was going on with that. Was the sound that they had was the sound of country music, maybe a generation before. That would have been the generation of country music that they grew up on. And as country music out of Nashville was getting less twangy,
Right.
the Bakersfield Sound still embraced that. And there were some rock roots that were forming in that, but it was it still fully embraced that classic 1930s 1940s country sound.
Yeah. You still held on to the roots because it was heritage, right? It was a heritage thing for because these people are listening to this music while they're out in the field. They had their transistor radios going, and that's what kept them moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a whole, I mean, it's amazing to think of the industry. You think of the music industry being driven by field hands, but there were
Right.
these huge weekend concerts in Salinas, in Stockton and Modesto, and you just go down the valley. Each town had these huge concerts every weekend. They start up on Saturday nights, and they, because everybody worked Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
but they'd go home, get cleaned up, and they were at that dance hall, and they were at that party, and they partied all through the night, and showed up to work Monday morning.
Yeah.
And it was an industry. I mean, it was, and that gave all these guys, Merle and everybody else, basically a career, because
Yeah.
there were thousands of tickets sold at these events. Not a few. We're talking all the migrant workers, all the Okies
Hmm.
showed up to listen to that music, and it was a machine. I mean, it, and the promoters made money, the musicians made money, and that's how it happened. I mean, that's how Merle, coming out of prison, he jumped in there and got on that circuit because he could fill a stadium.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
Mike, any thoughts on early Bakersfield Sound?
Yeah, what struck me with Bakersfield, at least, well, thinking of Buck and Merle, because why wouldn't you think of Buck and Merle? But that music, there was more, I think, much more musicianship than there was coming out of Nashville,
Yep.
and also the lyrics that they were coming up with, that it was almost like you said, with all those shows going on Saturdays, I've got to play better, I've got to write better, I've got to sing better. But also, it almost seemed like, at least to me anyway, like if you had a group of guys that you always got together and you played with, you had fun, but you always try to get a little bit better. You try to throw a lick out and show another guy up or something.
Yep.
And that's what that really seemed like to me, was all of them. They were having, it was work, but they were having fun, and they were all trying to do something to get a little bit better. And I think that's what made them all different, because I mean, just it's country, but it's not country, and
Right.
even, and even Buck did that one weird poppy acid song, "Who's Gonna Mow Your Grass," which I actually really like, but it's just weird. It's just weird, but it's really good, and it's like, that works. He should have done a lot more of that, because it actually worked. But anyway, it was good stuff. I've always enjoyed it. I had good memories of listening to that stuff growing up.
Yeah. And then Glenn Campbell also.
The original
Damn right.
crossover artist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to
Oops.
respond to that.
That's my watch. Yeah. That's very appropriate. Well, yeah, I love me some Glenn Campbell.
Yeah. And we talked about Buck Owens, and obviously he is well known as being one of the co-hosts of the show Hee Haw, and that's how I knew Buck Owens when I was a kid. My parents would watch Hee Haw, my grandparents would watch Hee Haw, so that's how I knew who Buck Owens and Roy Clark were. And that show was just very hokey and played to kind of the lowest common denominator of country music, as far as just
be careful there, young man.
it played into the stereotypes, is what I'm meaning. The
they
music
played off the humor of that, but they were the that is one of the longest running serial shows in history.
Yeah,
I mean, it
17 years or something like that.
Yeah, it goes a long time.
Yeah.
And that just tells you that it was consumed by everybody. It wasn't just consumed by, those folks that were predominantly country fans. Everybody tuned in. It was the number one show, on Saturdays or Sundays, whenever it aired. And I think it's just a good example of humanity. What keys humanity into something, and I think that show, the humor, the approachability, the folksiness of it, whatever you want to call it, most humans can identify with and go, that's entertaining. It's entertainment. I'm not going to get preached at. That's the first thing.
That's true.
I'm going to sit there and watch it. It's going to be funny. Aunt B, or I can't remember her name. She's going to say some jokes, and the guys in the cornfield are going to do their thing. And I'm going to see, Barbie Benton out there bouncing around or whatever.
Yep.
But it appealed to everybody because there was something in it for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, and the music, you can talk about Buck Owens, but his cohort was probably one of the finest guitar players in history.
Yeah.
So there was quality, right? We're talking about stepping up your licks. The serious music, the musicians that came on there were the best of the time.
Yeah.
And you were going to hear the best of the best at the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why we got such in. And I can tell you, my mom, San Francisco, Bay Area, city girl, my dad, Rocky Mountain hillbilly. There was a clash in our family when that show came on because my mom wasn't necessarily a fan. But I do appreciate that the fact that she never shut it off.
Mhm.
She would joke about it, but she would never turn it
Yeah.
off. She'd say that because ultimately she enjoyed it. I mean, she enjoyed that music, and I think that's that influence of that Okie influence that we have here in Northern California.
Yeah. Yeah, the musicianship on the show is without question. As somebody who grew up in the rural South, um, I can't tell you how many times I've met people from Chicago or New York, and they think that that's the way we were. Is we were, you know, in the cornfield. We can't spell corn.
Right.
You know,
You can't
and
spell liquor. That's why we spell it
yes,
Likper. Yeah.
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 So the playing into those stereotypes was not something that I personally loved about the show, but the musicianship on it was without question. And Buck Owens and Roy Clark, uh, they were very entertaining as hosts of the show, but incredibly talented musicians. Incredibly talented.
I don't mean to go on a tangent here. I think the reason it got produced the way it did was from the 30s until that show came out. So 25 years, which as older human beings, 25 years is nothing, right? That's a spit in the
Right.
bucket. Over that 25 years, imagine what those people had to overcome in the
Mhm.
sense of all the harassment, all the jokes, all the puns that they lived up. And it became almost a defense mechanism to make fun of yourself.
Sure.
So the producers made a film that they can make fun of the culture because everyone's going to make fun of it anyway. So educate people along the way, and I think they kind of did that. I think they embraced the jokes, they embraced the quirkiness and corn spelt with a K and backwards and everything else because they lived through it already. I mean, you can't make a joke that they even see the joke, right? The
Right.
joke doesn't mean anything. It doesn't hurt you anymore when you've accepted the joke. And I think that was the beauty of that film. I think or that show is very high end intellectual production to make that play, and I think that's one of the reasons it lasted for as long as it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
need to go back and watch some Hee Haw reruns. That would be
you got
interesting too. Yeah.
that should have been a primer for today's.
It should have. Well, maybe we'll do
Yeah.
a show at some point where it's just we're talking about Hee Haw. That we can do that.
We can drink corn liquor. We'll have all
Yes.
the best corn
I
liquors
think-
out there. It'll
Okay.
be
All right.
Alan Bishop and his corn liquor against us and our rice liquor. How's that?
I'm pretty sure Alan Bishop
Yeah.
has watched an episode or 10 of Hee Haw himself. So
Yeah.
so that is the end of part one, maybe part 1A of our show with Kris Koenig and of Golden Beaver Distillery. We're talking about the California Sound. And so we've gotten through the first part of the first part and had a really good time doing it. We've really enjoyed tasting Kris's whiskeys. He's got a couple of great barrels of bourbon, single barrels. You can go online and order that from him, goldenbeaverdistillery.com. So check that out. We'll be back next week with part 2, which will infamously be known possibly as the Linda Ronstadt episode. And for a lot of reasons, some of which are flashing through the screen right now. So anyway, we do talk a lot about Linda Ronstadt because she's an important part of that California sound. And she's also Linda Ronstadt, and an incredible voice and easy on the eyes. So anyway, next week we'll have another episode with Kris and our good friend Mike from My Whiskey Den. We'll be talking about Pacific Flyway. We'll be talking more about the California Sound, more than just Linda Ronstadt, but that may be the most important part. So be sure to follow Kris on social media, Golden Beaver Distillery, on Instagram, on Facebook. Check out their website. You can order their stuff there. Mike, you can find him at The Whiskey Dad on Instagram or My Whiskey Den. That show comes on every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. My Whiskey Den, where craft whiskey is king. As for our show, you can always find us on YouTube, where you can watch the show. And if you're watching us right now, just lightly tap that subscribe button. Join us. Don't miss a show. You don't want to miss next week. That's for darn sure, because it will be a lot of fun. If you are driving while you listen and you can't really watch on YouTube, great. We can help you out there too. Your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, Google, we're there. We have a Facebook page where we post all of our shows. We have a Facebook group where we talk about what we're drinking and talk about what we're listening to while we're drinking it. So maybe there's some You're No Good by Linda Ronstadt with some Golden Beaver Pacific Flyway. At any rate, I want to thank Kris and Mike for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know, because I've already seen it. I was there. I saw it. I was right there when it happened. You'll enjoy it too. I know you will. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies. I don't care. Hey, until next time, cheers, love, and free bird. Good night.